bottom of 52b, very bottom. Mishnah had said that drew a distinction between if the ox falls forward into the pit or falls backwards. And as I'm not sure if it was explained, but as we will see, the question is how directly did the pit cause the damage, and what exactly about it was the damage? So there's it turns out that one of the key features of the pit is the foul air in it, and if the animal falls in face first and it breathes the foul air, that's poisonous, and that's what kills it. That is the responsibility of bore. In the public domain, the person doesn't really own the ground of the pit, and then if it falls backwards, then it's getting its air from above, so you can't blame it on the foul air or poisonous air that accumulates in the pit. I mean, this is the whole thing is a little bizarre, if you ask me. I mean, sure, you could have a case where there are noxious gases in a pit, but doesn't seem to be generally the case that happens. Anyway, let's see what the Gemara has to say about this. Now, so the Mishnah said if because of the sound of the person digging the pit, if the animal falls forward, he's responsible, he's liable. If it falls backwards, he's not. Amarav, what does forward mean? Lefanav mamish means forward. Literally, it falls forward onto its face. And backwards means it falls onto its back. In both cases, the Mishnah is talking about a pit. So the point of the Mishnah is that if you dig the pit in the public domain, you're only liable if the animal falls in head first. And as I just mentioned, the cause of death is the air and the noxious air in the pit. And this is consistent with Rav Rav. Rav said elsewhere that when the Torah says that a bore, you're liable for digging a pit or for damage caused by a pit, he says explicitly it's because of the noxious air in the pit and not because of the blow that the animal receives when it falls in. Shmuel says, no, it doesn't matter how it falls forwards, backwards, and Shmuel Matame, they're still responsible. Shmuel Matame and Shmuel is consistent because the Yama, he said, yes, if there's noxious air in the pit that damages the animal, sure, you're responsible. But not only that, also because of the injury that it suffers because it falls into the pit and the blow that it receives, which was what one typically thinks of when you're thinking about damage in a pit. So in that case, what is the Mishnah talking about when it says if it falls backwards because of the sound of digging the pit, it startles it and it falls backwards and it dies, or gets damaged? What is that talking about? Could go in this called bar. So it's like you're digging the pit, you startle the animal, it falls backwards and injures itself or dies, not into the pit, but it just falls backwards. The cause of its fall is the noise you're making by digging the pit, and that startled it, but it fell and injures itself outside of the pit. That's what the Mishnah is talking about, where your project, because there it's not the pit itself that causes any damage, right? It fell backwards onto the street. That's why the Mishnah says you're not responsible, according to Shmuel. Okay, so now we're going to challenge Rav. Esrei, Babor bein Bahav bein L'achrav Chayav. The Brisa says that damages caused by a pit, it doesn't matter if the animal falls forwards or backwards, you're still responsible. Just to Rav. That disputes Rav, right? Because Rav says if the animal falls backwards into the pit, then you're not responsible because it's not the noxious air that kills it. Rav Chisda says, Moder Rav the Barber Shusa. What Rav's talking about here is when it's in private domain, in private property, right? The chayav, then you're liable either way. Because you can say either way. If it died because of the air, then hevla didachu, it's your pit. right? That's the case in Rishus Rabim as well. But if it died because of the impact of the fall, Chavata didachu, then in Rishus Rabim we can say it's not your property, right? So the animal fell into the pit onto public. It injured itself by falling onto public domain property. You're not responsible, but in private property, you are responsible. Rabba Amar. Okay, so that way you can understand the difference between these two, between Rav and this Bryce. So the Bryce is talking about private domain where you're responsible for the blow it received by hitting the bottom of the pit, and that's why this Bryce says it doesn't matter if it fell in forward or backward. But Rav is talking about if it fell in backwards and you're potter, you're exempt because that's a public domain case where you're not liable for the blow it received by falling into the pit. Rabba answers a different way. What are we talking about in the Brisa? You're talking about an animal that, as it falls, it flips over. To nafal ape, it falls in face first. And then it twists in the air. It's a gymnastic cow, and a gymnastic ox, and it flips over while falling and fell on its back. So in that case, you're liable both ways. Even if it falls back, it lands on its back. The havla, the hanibe, because it's falling in face first. It breathes the noxious gases. It's already mortally wounded, right? And then it flips over onto its back before it hits the ground, and so it's dead anyway from the noxious air. It doesn't matter if it ends up on its front or its back. That's what the Brisa is talking about. That's why the Brisa says you are liable either way. Rav Yosef Amar, and the third way to explain Rav and the Brisa, in the Brisa, we're not talking about the damage done to the ox. We're talking about the damage done to the pit, right? The ox falls in. Now you have a dead body at the bottom of the pit. Maybe it's the cistern, right? Maybe there's drinking water down there, and now you've got a dead ox in it. It damages the value of the pit. It's no longer a good cistern. Mind you, it fouls the water in the cistern. That doesn't matter. The ox falls in face forward, face backward, doesn't matter. We're not talking about what happened to the ox, we're talking about what happened to the water in the pit. Then it makes no difference how the animal got there. It is the owner of the ox is still responsible for the boar, for ruining the boar. Tane Rav Hananya L'Sioy de Rav, and Rav Hananya supported Rav because the Torah says v'nafal. All right, it says v'nafal shamach hamar. A person digs a pit and an ox or donkey falls into it. Ad sheipol derech nefila. So he interprets that as saying it falls the regular way, like doing backflips. Falling is an unusual case, right? Usually when an animal falls into something, it falls face first. And that is supporting Rav, because Rav says you're only responsible for damage to the ox if it falls in face first. From this derivation, they said, Nafal of Mikala Kriya Chayav, if the animal falls in because you're digging the bore, then you're responsible. La'achrav Mikol Kriya Pater. But if it falls backwards, then you're off the hook. And we're talking about bore in both cases. Okay. We said earlier in the Mishnah, Nafal of Mikala Kriya Chayav. If it falls forward because of the sound of the digging, then you're responsible for the animal's damage. BMI, but why is that the case? Nema Kore Garmle. Maybe it's the maybe it is the person who is digging in the pit. So it's maybe we should pin the responsibility, since the Mishnah is talking about falling from the sound of the digging, right? So it's not the pit itself, it's the person who's making the sound. Like, why are you pinning this? Why are you calling this a case of bor in the first place? It should be a case of adam, of a person causing damage by making the, with his backhoe, by startling the animal. Amar of Shimi, so why is it a case of bor? Amar of Shimi Barashi. Rav Shimi says Hamani. Okay, that's a good point, but who Whose opinion is this? Rabbi Nassan. He is according to Rabbi Nassan. Diamar. Baal Habor Hazeka Kavid. The owner of the pit may have done the damage, right? It may be uh, like the person who dug the pit, like the owner of the pit, if you will, is ultimately involved. And here's an interesting thing. Somebody's, I don't know if you remember the movie National Treasure, right? Where the FBI guy tells Nicolas Cage, somebody's got to go to prison, right? Somebody's got to pay this damage, right? So if you can't pin it on one person for various technical reasons or for halachic reasons, then there's somebody else involved. That person is going to have to bear the cost. So where you can't collect from the digger, because that's not a case of bor, and he's not really directly causing the damage. He's making noise, which causes damage. So he's really off the hook. Somebody's got to go to prison, right? Somebody's got to pay. So we're going to pin it on the owner of the pit. Titania. Now, what's the source of this idea? We have a brisa. Sure, shedochaf es chavero. You have two oxes. One pushes the other or jostles the other. Labor fell into a pit. Balabor chayav. Sorry, balhashor chayav. The owner of the ox, the jostling ox, the one that pushed the other one, is responsible for the damage to the pushed ox. Balabor pater, and the owner of the pit is exempt. Rabbi Nassan says Bala Hashor Mishalim Mech. So Balabor Mishalim Mech. No, they split half and half. Okay, so from this opinion, we're assuming, we're understanding that the reason that you split half and half is that everybody's got some responsibility here. So we're gonna analyze this a little further. Why half and half? Okay. But first we're going to interject Vatanya, but then we have another brisa that says Rabbi Nassan Omer, the same Rabbi Nassan says, that you split it 3/4 and 1/4. Well, not a problem. When it's a tam, when the shore that causes the damage is a tam, is not a known to be a damaging ox, and you only pay half. So one guy only pays half of his half, right? He pays a quarter. And then the other guy should really only pay half. He's got shares equal responsibility. But and this is where we get the idea that somebody's got to pay that last quarter, right? If one guy only pays a quarter, one guy pays a half, then the owner of the damaged ox is still out a quarter, right? So the idea is that somebody's got to pay. So we're going to pin it on the owner of the pit, and he ends up paying not half, but 3/4. Ubatam my kasavas, the Gemara still tries to figure out what's going on here. I kind of gave away the end. Ubatam my kasavar. What about the tam? What does he hold? What does Rav Nassan hold? Ikasavar haikule hazeka avad. If a haikule hazeka avad, if you're going to say that each party, the owner of the pit and the owner of the damaging ox, is really responsible for the whole thing, right? But we're not going to pay double, right? We're going to, like, everybody has full responsibility, and we're going to split up the actual damage among them. So Haimashalim Palga, Haimashalim Palga. So then each one should pay half, right? So where do you get this? Where do you get the 3/4 and 1/4 thing? Because of our high palga hazek ovid, the high palga hazek ovid, and if you hold that, no, they're not each responsible for the whole damage, and you split it up. Each one is only responsible for half of the damage because he only contributed half of the liability, right? So balabor mishalim palga, balashor revia, v'idach riva mafsid. So then, like, why does one have to pay 3/4, right? If each one is only liable for 50% of the damage, how does one guy end up paying 3/4 in the case of the tam? On Rabbi Nassan Daina, who Rava says that Rabbi Nassan is a practical in a sense of a practical matter, he's a judge. In other words, he has to deal with these things all the time. It's not ivory tower stuff. So he gets right down to the bottom of things, right? He really understands what's going on, the principles here. Really, he holds everyone is 100% responsible for the damage, and we split it. So why don't we say each one pays half? Because the owner of the ox can say to the owner of the pit, like, what does it do me any good that I have to pay that we're splitting the damage, right? It's like I'm only half responsible for half the damage, but even if it were all my fault, I would still only be responsible for half the damage because my shore is a tom, right? So what does it do to me to say that we're splitting the liability? I'm paying the same, whether I have 100% liability or 50% liability, I'm only paying 50% because my shore is a tom, right? So therefore I say that I'm only going to pay a quarter, right? Because since we're splitting the liability, and my total liability is limited to 50%, so I'm going to only pay half of that liability. I'm only going to pay a quarter. So this demonstrates, as I said before, that so why does the other guy pay 3/4? Because somebody's got to pay the bill. Or you could explain as follows. Really, each one is only responsible for 50% of the liability. So, like, why does one have to pay 3/4 if he's only responsible for 50%? Like, let the damaged party lose out. Because the ox owner can say to the pit owner, the damaged party can say, my ox is found in your pit dead. You prove me wrong. You killed it, right? You have a dead ox, my dead ox in your pit. I'm coming to you for all the damages, right? You're going to get somebody else to pay a quarter because hey, that's fine, but you're still on the line for 3/4. Okay, fine. I can recover 25% from the owner of the other ox, right? But the rest I'm coming after you for it. Okay, so again, the same thing is like somebody's got to pay the damage, and since we can only pin a quarter of it on the owner of the damaging ox, we're going to pin the rest of it on the owner of the pit, even though he's really only responsible. He really should only be liable for 50%. Rava says something similar. You put a rock at the mouth of the pit. And an ox comes and trips over it and falls into the pit. That's the dispute between Rav Nassan and the rabbis. Who's responsible? Is it the person who owns the rock, who put the rock there, or the person who owned the pit? Same thing like the damaging shore that jostled the other shore into the pit. Whereas it's pshita, it's obvious, right? What's the difference between these two cases? Because I might have said Hashem, who the Amar Bala Bor Bala Shor, Ilav Bira Didi, Tar Dida, Chavakatule. Because in the case of one ox pushing the other, so the pit owner can say to the ox owner, to the damaging ox owner, Ilav Bira Didi, Tar Dida, Chavakatule. Like, let's say there was no pit there. Your ox would have killed the damaged ox, the dead ox, would have killed him anyway by trampling on it, right? So happened he fell into my pit and died there, but your ox was doing the damage. So therefore you pay more. But where there's a rock, where it's tripping over a rock, the owner of the rock, the guy who placed the rock there, can say to the pit owner, you love like, we're not talking about a violent ox attacking the damaged or dead ox. We're talking about a rock in a way. If he had tripped over the rock, nothing would have happened, right? But because he tripped over the rock into your pit and fell into the pit, that's what caused him to die. Therefore, you have more liability. That's why That's why the owner of the rock is liable. Gemale, Elav Evan will have about nothing because so you would have thought you could say that, but no, what we actually say is it's not for the rock. The ox wouldn't have fallen into the pit, right? Therefore we say that just that they have the same, both cases have the same responsibility, whether it's a rock that tripping over a rock that causes the ox to fall into the pit, or whether it's another ox jostling it or attacking it that causes it to fall in the pit, same rule. Even though you might have thought there's a distinction between the active attacking ox and the passive stumbling block of the rock. So the Rava is telling us that they're both, that we don't look at it differently. It's both the same thing. Okay, Itmar. We have a bracha. Shor v'shor psulim v'gashim. You have an ox, and shor psulim v'gashim, and you have an ox that is from a disqualified kudshim, right? Disqualified sacrifice. So the background here is that it's only that kudshim, that an ox that is belongs to the temple, right? That has been sanctified as a sacrifice does not fall under this whole set of regulations about damaging others, right? The shor of kudshim is off the hook. But what about psulei hamikdashim? What about the case where it's a disqualified, right? It has a mum or some other thing went wrong with it, and the Gemara interjects, mind you, what kind of psulei hamikdashim? Shor b'bor, shor b'chor delo pariklei. We're talking specifically about a bechor, a firstborn ox, which you can't redeem. It's like this bechor, you can't exchange it, right? This bechor is a bechor once it is born by virtue of its birth. It is hekdesh. It is sanctified. If it develops a mum, then it's no longer. So that's what we're talking about here. So what is the rule for the so what's the case here is shor v'shor psulim v'gashim shenaghu. These two oxen attacked another ox. So one of them is a regular ox who's responsible, as the whole Masechta we've been discussing so far, and the other one is kind of exempt because it's psulei hamikdashim. So does it count as regular hektish or not? Excuse me. In other words, is it exempt just like any other hektish? Abai says, "Mishalim chatzi nesek." You pay half. The owner of the regular shor pays half, and the owner of psulei hamikdashim doesn't pay anything. Ravina says no, he pays 1/4, and the other pays nothing. And habatam, and we're talking about where the ordinary ox was a tam. As we saw, Rabbi Nassan says somebody's got to pay, so he pays half. And we'll examine that in a minute. And the rabbis say no, he only pays 1/4 because he has 50% of 50% liability. That's important. Or you could explain halacha. Maybe both cases are according to the rabbis. Habatam, habamuad. Or you could say that one case is talking about a tam, and that's why you only pay a half of a half of 1/4. And muad, you pay your full half. Another version of what we just said, that the dispute is not between the half and 1/4, but between the full damages and half damages. And both are talking about according to the rabbis, you're only liable 50%. You pay 50%. According to Rabbi Nassan, you pay 50%, and somebody's got to pay the other 50%. The shor psulei hamikdashim is not going to pay it because it's exempt, so you have to pay its share as well. or you could understand that both are going to Rabbi Nassan, Haba more and Haba Tam. As you just said, the case of where the ruling is pay 50% as a muad because you pay your full share of the half damages, and the Tam pays only half share of the half damages, which is the point. Amara, Bava says, Sharva Adam Shadach. You have an ox and a person damages something into a pit, pushes an ox into a pit or whatever. Regarding the actual damage caused, everybody's liable. What about the other four types of damages, right? Tsar, Ripu, Shavas, and Boshas. If you cause a miscarriage, the damage caused to the fetus. So then Adam Chayev, only a person who causes damage is responsible for those damages. Sure, Bar Potter, but those damages are not payable by the owner of the ox or the pit because only nezek is included in those. Linyan kofar. What about the kofar, the payment for causing the death? Ushloshim shalavad, or if you cause the death of an Eved Kanani, you're liable for 30 shekel. Shorchayev Adam Bar Pturim. That is only applied to a shor, right? The Torah says that penalty of kofar or the 30 shkalim for an Eved is only applied to damage caused by a shore, not by a person. Person, because you're actually responsible, you're liable for the death penalty if you cause someone's death, if you commit murder. And so because of that, we ignore your financial liability. And Bor also doesn't, there's no requirement to pay kofar for the death caused by a Bor. Linyan Kalim of the Shor Psulim Dashim. What about payment for if you push some kind of like keli, like a glass pitcher and it breaks, or damage caused by that's a Psulim Dashim. Adam Shor Chayavim Ubar Pater. So then a person is responsible for that kind of damage. A shor is responsible for that kind of damage, but not a book. My Talmud, right? The Torah says about an animal being killed by a boar, the Hamesielo, that the owner of the he gets to keep the value of the carcass, right, of the dead shore, whatever you can use the skin or whatever use you can make out of it. But we're talking about the one who the dead body is in his property. Yes, so that applies to a boar, but not to the other categories. So what? This is Rava's definite statement. Is that the case? Rava asked this question. He didn't know if this is the case. He was unsure. Dubai Rava, because we have another source that says Rava asked. What if you have a shore that's falls into a pit? What do we say? Do we say that we don't apply the Hamesi because here you're not really the owner, right? It still belongs, as it were, to Hekdesh. Hamesi Labalim. Or we're not talking about the like who gets the benefit of the dead body, but rather we're saying who has to remove the dead body, right? Who has to take care of the dead body? So it's unclear to Rabba. So why is Rabba didn't know, and then he found out the answer. So initially he had it as a question, and then he made it as a statement once he figured it out. So then, how does Rabba know that this rule that the owner of the damaged ox is the one responsible for removing it? Because about when it talks about damages of a shore, it also says Vamesielo. So the Gemara says, wait, so in one case, you're saying Hamesielo means that you have to dispose of the body. In the other case, you're saying it applies to something. My chazis the shore mafkas leilabali. In the case of the shore, where it says it means that the owner of the shore has to remove the body. He's responsible. And the same phrase used in the other way when it comes to a bor, that he gets compensated for that he owns the value of the dead. You could say it backwards. Mar says Mistabra Petur not Gabe Bor Kol Patrabos Akelin. It makes more sense to say that the exemption of you interpret Amesialo about a bor as an exemption of responsibility, because the bar is less severe in that you can it's not bar is not responsible for the breakage of kalim. It's only responsible for the damage caused to an ox or a person or whatever. Patur gabe shor. Wait a minute. You want to say bor is more lenient? I'll tell you, shor is more lenient because you have such a thing as a tom, right? That you're not responsible for the full damages the first time or the second time that it damages. So that's the one that is more lenient. So apply the lenient interpretation there. You never find like that a shore is completely off the hook. So a bor is completely off the hook in the case of kalim, and that is a definite leniency, whereas a shore, the first time or second time it damages, it's only responsible for half. But as a category, shore still has within it the idea that you're fully responsible, and so that is a more severe Torah treats that more severely. Okay, we'll call it for here today and pick it up again tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.